They began as forgotten raiders on the edge of a dying empire. Within 150 years, they would shake the world. In the shadow of shattered empires, as Mongol thunder echoed across the east and Byzantium clung to fading glory, a new power stirred in the forgotten frontiers of Anatolia. This is the story of a people without a past. Nomads and raiders, outcasts and warriors, who carved their future with the sword and the word. From the smouldering ruins of the Seljuks and the crumbling walls of Constantinople, the Ottoman Beylik emerged, small, obscure, yet unstoppable. In a world ruled by warlords and fractured faiths, they offered more than conquest. They promised order, vision, and destiny. Through fire and blood, the Ottomans expanded, devouring cities and breaking kingdoms, not as mere raiders, but as architects of empire. As Byzantine emperors made desperate pacts, as Balkan kings fell one by one, a young sultan prepared for the moment that would change history forever. The conquest of Constantinople is still distant, but its storm is already building. Before Mehmed the Conqueror rises, before the imperial banners fly over 3 continents, we must understand the centuries that shaped them. This is not just the story of a dynasty, it is the forging of an empire, from dust, from faith, from ambition. This is the Ottoman rise. Before the Ottomans ever raised a banner, Anatolia was already on fire. Empires had fallen, warlords ruled, and the road to power was paved with ash. But in this chaos, a new force would soon rise. In the final decades of the 13th century, the land that would later become the heart of the Ottoman Empire bore little resemblance to a unified state. Western Anatolia was not a cradle of empire. It was a battleground of fragmented principalities, competing warbands, and decaying imperial legacies. Following the catastrophic Battle of KOSOVO in 1243, the once dominant Seljuk Sultanate of Rum was shattered by the Mongol advance. With their power broken and Mongol overlords asserting control through the Ilkhanate, a power vacuum emerged across the Anatolian plateau. This vacuum, exacerbated by the declining influence of the Byzantine Empire after the reconquest of Constantinople in 1261, allowed for the rise of a series of small Turkish-led principalities known as beyliks. According to Professor Heath Lowry of Princeton University, Anatolia in the late 13th century resembled the Iberian taifas of Muslim Spain, fractured, dynamic, and ruled by local power brokers whose legitimacy was derived from personal charisma and military success rather than institutional stability. These beyliks were not fully sovereign entities. They existed under nominal Mongol suzerainty, and the coins minted during this period typically bore the names of Ilkhanid rulers, not local leaders. Yet in practice, these frontier lords wielded real authority, militarily, economically, and spiritually over their regions. They commanded loyalty not through written law, but through martial prowess and religious legitimacy, often positioning themselves as champions of the Gaza, the struggle against non-Muslim enemies. This chaotic mosaic of Anatolia was both volatile and opportunistic. Byzantine fortresses dotted the western hills, often under-defended and economically hollow. Christian settlements, Turkish nomads, dervish orders, and retired Seljuk military elites all coexisted, often uneasily, in a landscape marked by fluid borders and transient loyalties. Amid this disarray, one minor principality, initially indistinguishable from the rest, began to take root around the town of Soyut, located in the borderlands of Byzantine Bithynia. Its leader, Osman, remains an elusive figure. No contemporary documents survive from his reign, and what little we know is filtered through later Ottoman chronicles, written generations after his death. Osman left no writings, no grand declarations, but he minted his own coins. That one act signaled the birth of a state. The origin stories surrounding Osman are themselves shrouded in ambiguity. Some claim his lineage stems from a Turkic tribe fleeing the Mongols in Central Asia. Others see him as a local warlord who leveraged Byzantine instability. Historian Colin Imber cautions, Any attempt to extract facts from the legends of Osman is doomed to speculation. But what is clear is that he created a political structure capable of lasting well beyond his lifetime. Osman's Beylik was not defined by blood ties alone. It was a coalition of tribal nomads, religious figures, and local converts. The early Ottoman enterprise was strikingly inclusive. Byzantine defectors such as KOSOVO, a Greek Christian who converted to Islam and became one of Osman's closest companions, played essential roles in the early military campaigns. Another key figure, Hranislav, was of Bulgarian origin. These men and their families did not simply fight for Osman, they became Ottoman. Caroline Finkel is a British historian and writer based in Turkey. She has a doctorate in Ottoman history from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. In her book, Osman's Dream, from 2005, she writes, "What set the early Ottomans apart was not just their military success, but their capacity to absorb and unite disparate communities under a shared political vision. The ideological glue that held this nascent community together was the ideal of Gaza, or religious warfare against infidels. This concept, though later exaggerated into a central pillar of Ottoman identity, served a useful ideological function in the early period. As Halil Inalcik explained, the ideal of Gaza, holy war, was an important factor in the foundation and development of the Ottoman state, imbued with the ideal of continuous expansion of the Dar al-Islam. But modern historians are more cautious. The so-called Gaza thesis, championed by Austrian historian Paul Wittek in 1938, once dominated academic thinking. He argued that early Ottoman expansion was driven by a deeply religious fervor. Today, however, scholars like Rudi Paul Lindner and Linda Darling argue that Gaza was just one among many motives. Far from being holy warriors, early Ottoman leaders operated with pragmatic alliances, economic ambitions, and political opportunism. Indeed, economic incentives, particularly access to land and plunder, were perhaps more immediate motivations for the warriors who flocked to Osman's banner. These included Akıncı's raiders, whose main purpose was to harass and weaken neighboring Byzantine strongholds. The Ottomans' strategic positioning along the Byzantine border meant that they could direct their campaigns westward, avoiding direct confrontation with stronger Turkish rivals further east. The fluidity of the frontier enabled Osman's principality to act with relative freedom. The Byzantines, weakened by internal strife and imperial overreach, were ill-equipped to respond to constant raids. Towns like Bursa and Nicaea became vulnerable. The first of these, Bursa, would eventually fall not by storm, but by starvation and blockade. By the time of Osman's death in 1323/4, the Ottoman polity remained small, but its foundation was secure. His son, Orhan, would go on to consolidate these early gains, expanding into Byzantine territory, creating formal administrative structures and minting coins in his own name. But the ideological and structural DNA of the Ottoman state had already been set. In a land torn apart by Mongol conquest and Byzantine decline, Osman forged a new order. But it would be Orhan, his son, who would prove that this new state could survive and grow. They were once frontier raiders, a marginal Beylik clinging to the edges of a crumbling empire. But under Orhan, son of Osman, the Ottomans would take their first irreversible step toward empire. This is the chapter where opportunism turns to statecraft and a local principality becomes a regional power. When Osman died around 1323 or 24, he left behind a fragile state with no written administration, no siege capabilities, and little to distinguish it from other Anatolian beyliks. His son Orhan would be the first to transform the Ottoman polity into something more permanent. Historian Caroline Finkel describes this pivotal transition as the moment when the Ottomans went from being a tribal enterprise to a nascent state with imperial ambitions. The reign of Orhan thus marks the Ottomans' first attempt at building institutions, consolidating conquests, and expanding beyond Anatolia. Orhan's first challenge was to secure the region of Bithynia, a formerly Byzantine province that was becoming increasingly Turkified due to demographic and military pressure. The Ottomans, operating from their stronghold in Söğüt, had long harassed the region through raids, but it was Orhan who introduced a more strategic approach to conquest. The fall of Bursa in 1326, after a prolonged siege begun under Osman, was a turning point. Bursa became the new capital and symbolized Ottoman permanence. Historian Halil İnalcık asserts that the conquest of Bursa allowed the Ottomans to shift from tribal raids to urban governance, from booty to taxation. By establishing a seat of government in an urban center, Orhan laid the groundwork for a more enduring state structure. The construction of mosques, markets, and administrative buildings followed, signaling an emerging civic identity. To manage his growing domain, Orhan turned to the Seljuk model. He imported Persian-speaking bureaucrats from eastern Anatolia, who brought with them administrative and legal traditions that had matured under the Seljuks of Rum. The first Ottoman madrasa, Islamic college, was founded in Iznik in 1331, marking a significant milestone in cultural and educational development. The historian Cemal Kafadar notes, "With the arrival of scholars and judges from the East, the Ottomans began to craft a distinct synthesis of nomadic Turkic customs and urban Islamic governance. This synthesis would become a hallmark of early Ottoman flexibility, a trait that allowed them to absorb and govern diverse populations." The shift from tribal leadership to centralized administration was gradual but deliberate. Orhan began minting coins in his own name, an act of sovereignty that previous Turkish beys had avoided, preferring to acknowledge the nominal authority of the Ilkhanate. In this, Orhan asserted not only independence, but also legitimacy. Though still reliant on tribal warriors, Orhan expanded the military foundation of the state. The term Ghazi, a warrior for the faith, was increasingly used to define the Ottoman mission, though, as Paul Wittek famously argued in his Gaza thesis, this was as much a legitimizing ideology as a reflection of reality. Wittek wrote, "The early Ottoman state was, in essence, a Ghazi principality, a polity bound together by the ideology of Islamic conquest." While this theory has since been nuanced by scholars such as Heath Lowry and Cemal Kafadar, the concept of Gaza undoubtedly played a role in attracting warriors from both Muslim and Christian backgrounds. It served as a flexible ideological umbrella under which Orhan could unite disparate groups. Orhan's military conquests continued with the capture of key Byzantine cities, including Nicaea, Iznik, in 1331, and Nicomedia, Izmit, in 1337. These conquests gave the Ottomans control over vital communication routes and trade centers in northwestern Anatolia. Orhan's most consequential Anatolian conquest was that of the neighboring Beylik of Karesi in 1345–46. Unlike the rural, loosely organized Ottoman domain, Karesi possessed a seasoned military and a naval force based near the Dardanelles. Its absorption gave Orhan command of the western approaches to the Sea of Marmara and the crossing points into Europe. With Karesi's warriors integrated into the Ottoman army, Orhan stood poised to move into the Balkans. This was more than mere territorial acquisition. It was a geostrategic transformation. Historian Heath Lowry has argued that the conquest of Karesi provided the Ottomans not only with a seasoned Ghazi corps, but with the critical logistical capability for European campaigns. In 1346, Orhan solidified Ottoman-Byzantine relations by marrying Theodora, daughter of the Byzantine regent John VI Cantacuzene. This was not merely a symbolic union. It served tangible military and political goals. In 1352, John VI called on Orhan for aid during a Byzantine civil war, allowing Ottoman troops to enter Europe for the first time. Their reward was the fortress of Chimpe on the Gallipoli Peninsula. This foothold would soon prove decisive. In 1354, an earthquake devastated the Byzantine fortifications in Gallipoli. Orhan's son, Suleiman Pasha, swiftly occupied the ruined fortresses, beginning the permanent Ottoman presence in Europe. The Byzantines protested, but to no avail. As Donald Quatayat succinctly puts it, Gallipoli marked the point of no return. The Ottomans were now a transcontinental state. Orhan's success also lay in his ability to integrate non-Turkish, non-Muslim populations into his realm. His court included Christian converts such as KOSOVO, a former Byzantine official who became a prominent Ottoman commander. These alliances were based not on ethnic or religious solidarity, but on political loyalty and shared interest in military success. Marcus Koller observes, the early Ottoman polity functioned more like a frontier confederation than a rigid Islamic state. It absorbed Christians, Greeks, and Slavs as easily as it did Muslim Turks. By the time of Orhan's death in 1362, the Ottomans were no longer just one of many Anatolian beyliks. They had established a durable capital, developed rudimentary institutions, and begun to reshape the political map of Southeast Europe. While his father, Osman, gave his name to the dynasty, it was Orhan who laid the foundations for empire. His reign was not marked by dramatic battles or sweeping reforms, but by patient state-building, tactical marriages, and calculated military campaigns. As Halil İnalcık reminds us, the genius of the early Ottoman rulers was not in conquest alone, but in their ability to consolidate and integrate. In the next chapter, we will examine how Murad I built upon Orhan's legacy, expanding deep into the Balkans, centralizing state power, and transforming the Ottoman principality into a formidable sultanate poised for global significance. What turned a minor Anatolian principality into a European empire? The answer lies in a transformation during the reign of Murad I, a transformation marked by centralization, militarization, and a decisive confrontation on the Balkan plains. Kosovo was not merely a battle. It was a signal to Europe that the Ottomans were no longer a frontier state, but a rising imperial force. In the mid-14th century, the Ottoman polity underwent a fundamental transformation. Under the rule of Sultan Murad, the first who ruled from 1362 to 1389, the dynasty shifted from a loosely organized principality into a centralized and expansionist regime. This transformation was neither immediate nor inevitable. It was shaped by the internal restructuring of the state and the strategic exploitation of the disintegration of Balkan powers. Born the son of Orhan, Murad ascended the throne at a time of both promise and peril. The Turkish beyliks of Anatolia were still a threat to Ottoman cohesion, and in Europe, the collapse of the Serbian Empire after the death of Stefan Dušan had created a power vacuum. Murad seized upon this chaos and turned it into opportunity. As historian Halil İnalcık notes, Murad was not merely a military leader, he was the architect of Ottoman statehood. A central part of Murad's legacy lies in his administrative reforms. He moved the capital from Bursa to Edirne, Adrianople, a symbolic and strategic relocation that emphasized the Ottoman shift toward the Balkans. Edirne became not only a military hub, but a seat of governance. The court bureaucracy expanded, and the system of taimar, land grants in exchange for military service, was formalized into a pillar of state military organization. Yet, perhaps Murad's most consequential innovation was the institutionalization of the Janissary Corps. Formed initially as a palace guard, the Janissaries, Yeniçeri, quickly evolved into the backbone of the Ottoman infantry. Recruited through the Devshirme system, Christian boys from the Balkans were taken, converted to Islam, and subjected to a rigorous military and ideological training. Far from an act of mere coercion, this system embedded the empire's authority into the households and hearts of conquered populations. As Caroline Finkel writes, the Janissaries represented the Sultan's monopoly on violence. Loyal only to him, they were the sharp edge of a centralized state. Their discipline and loyalty allowed Murad to reduce his reliance on tribal contingents and forge a standing force that mirrored his vision of unity and permanence. Militarily, Murad extended Ottoman power deep into the Balkans. His early campaigns targeted Byzantine remnants in Thrace, followed by incursions into Bulgaria and Macedonia. A critical turning point came with the defeat of a Balkan coalition at the Battle of Maritsa in 1371. The Serbian nobility, weakened and fragmented after Dushan's empire, was no match for the disciplined Ottoman forces. The death of King Vukašin and the subsequent fragmentation of Serbian principalities left the region open to further Ottoman advances. But the ultimate crucible of Murad's reign was the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, a battle that has become both historical event and national myth. Prince Lazar of Serbia had assembled a coalition of Slavic forces in a final attempt to halt the Ottoman advance. Murad, aware of the stakes, personally led his army north from Edirne to face them. The battle itself remains shrouded in conflicting accounts, but the outcome was clear, a bloody stalemate that favoured the Ottomans. Prince Lazar was captured and executed. Murad, however, did not live to see the aftermath. According to the Ottoman chronicle of Ashik Pashazadeh, Murad was assassinated in the aftermath of the battle by a Serbian nobleman, Miloš Obilić, a story later romanticized and embedded in Serbian epic tradition. The death of a reigning sultan on the battlefield was unprecedented, yet it did not destabilize the Ottoman state. His son, Bayezid, acted swiftly, executing his brother Yaqub to secure the succession and earning the sobriquet Yildirim, the Thunderbolt. This ruthless act underscores a crucial reality of Ottoman dynastic politics. Fratricide was a functional, if brutal, tool of political stability. Historian Mark Mazower captures the significance of Kosovo. It was a moment of transition, the end of Balkan autonomy and the birth of Ottoman imperial dominance in Europe. The battle symbolized both the depth of Ottoman ambition and the resilience of its structures under crisis. Culturally and religiously, Murad's reign was also significant. He presented himself as Ghazi Sultan, the holy warrior of Islam, appealing to the frontier ideology that had long defined Anatolian beyliks. Yet he also adopted elements of Byzantine imperial tradition and encouraged architectural patronage in conquered lands. This dual identity, Turkish Muslim conqueror and imperial ruler over Christians, was to define the Ottoman self-conception for centuries. Murad's legacy is thus twofold. On one hand, he represents the culmination of the Ghazi ethos, the warrior leader who pushed Islam's frontiers. On the other, he institutionalized the bureaucratic and military frameworks that would underpin Ottoman governance. His reign exemplifies what historian Cemal Kafadar describes as the synthesis of frontier and imperial paradigms. The consequences of his victories in the Balkans cannot be overstated. The vassalage of local Serbian lords, the capture of strategic towns like Sofia and Niš, and the demographic shifts through conquest and settlement laid the foundations for Ottoman control over southeastern Europe for the next 5 centuries. As historian Heath Lowry remarks, by the end of Murad's reign, the Ottomans were no longer guests in Europe. They were landlords. In sum, the reign of Murad the Farm was a transformative era in Ottoman history. He turned a militarized principality into a functioning imperial machine. Through institutional reforms, military conquest, and ideological framing, Murad laid the groundwork for the empire's classical age. His death at Kosovo was not the end of a dream, but the beginning of a new imperial reality. One in which the Ottomans no longer looked east to their Anatolian origins, but west to the European world they now claimed as their own. What happens when the death of a sultan becomes the catalyst for unprecedented conquest? In the shadow of Murad I's death at Kosovo in 1389, the Ottoman Empire stood on a precipice. Would the fragile structure his rule had forged hold, or would it fracture? Bayezid I, known as Yildirim, did not hesitate. With unmatched speed, he transformed uncertainty into momentum and led the empire into a decade of relentless campaigns, shaping the future of Southeast Europe and Anatolia alike. The death of Murad I at the Battle of Kosovo had the potential to destabilize the nascent Ottoman Empire. The victory was Pyrrhic, and the army's morale hung in the balance. Yet Bayezid's reaction was immediate. Even before his father's body was removed from the battlefield, Bayezid, with the support of key commanders, secured his claim to the throne, reportedly executing his brother Yaqub to eliminate any threat to succession. As the historian Halil Inalcik observes, Bayezid emerged as a ruler of intense energy, ruthless decisiveness, and immense ambition. This decisive moment not only stabilized the empire, but also revealed the autocratic and militaristic temperament that would define his reign. Bayezid's first major endeavor was to assert Ottoman dominance over the Anatolian peninsula. Following the decline of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, a patchwork of Turkic beyliks had emerged, often acting autonomously and rivaling Ottoman claims to supremacy. Bayezid viewed their independence as an existential threat. Beginning with Karaman, a principal rival and symbolic center of Turkish resistance, Bayezid launched successive campaigns that subdued the beyliks of Aydin, Saruhan, Menteşe, Hamid, and Germian. While some accepted vassalage, others were absorbed outright. He used strategic marriages, most notably to the daughter of the Germianid ruler, as instruments of diplomacy. His ambition was made explicit when he adopted the title Sultan-ur-Rum, Sultan of Rome, staking ideological claim to the Seljuk legacy. As historian Cemal Kafadar notes, by assuming this title, Bayezid signaled not only political domination over Anatolia, but a deeper civilizational mission to lead the Muslim Turkish world. This unification provided Bayezid with a stronger base for his army, greater taxation revenue, and ensured that no Anatolian rival could rise behind him while he campaigned in Europe. While Anatolia was being consolidated, Bayezid also renewed the expansionist momentum in the Balkans. Between 1390 and 1395, Ottoman forces campaigned against Bulgaria, Serbia, Bosnia, and Wallachia. The city of Tarnovo fell in 1393, effectively ending the Second Bulgarian Empire. Vidin was taken soon after, and Serbian lords, including Stefan Lazarević, submitted as vassals. Bayezid's strategy in the Balkans was not mere conquest. He established a network of vassal principalities that paid tribute and provided troops but retained some internal autonomy. This system provided a flexible and cost-effective form of rule. According to Stanford J. Shaw, Bayezid's administrative genius lay in balancing coercion with co-optation. His Balkan vassals were not crushed but bound to the Ottoman military system. Yet, this method had limits. Wallachia, under the leadership of Mircea the Elder, offered persistent resistance. Bayezid's 1394 campaign into Wallachian territory met stiff opposition, with the Ottomans suffering defeats despite numerical superiority. It was a reminder that expansion in the Balkans would be contested. In 1394, Bayezid turned his gaze to Constantinople, the city that had eluded Ottoman hands for nearly a century. He blockaded the Byzantine capital and constructed the Anadoluhisar fortress on the Asian side of the Bosporus, attempting to cut off the city from reinforcements and supplies. The siege demonstrated both his ambition and his understanding of the city's geopolitical importance. Though the siege ultimately failed due to logistical limitations and aid sent by European states, it was symbolically powerful. Historian Mark C. Bartusis argues, Bayezid's siege of Constantinople was not only a military maneuver, but a diplomatic message to Europe. The Ottomans were no longer a peripheral power. Despite their failure to take the city, the Ottomans extracted significant concessions from the Byzantines, who were forced into tributary status and allowed Muslim quarters within the city, marking the beginning of a deeper Ottoman footprint within the Byzantine heartland. Bayezid's Balkan campaigns and the siege of Constantinople alarmed Western Christendom. Pope Boniface IX called for a new crusade, and in 1396 a coalition led by Sigismund of Hungary, along with French, Burgundian and Wallachian contingents, launched a campaign to halt Ottoman expansion. Meeting at Nicopolis, the armies clashed in what would become one of the last major crusades of the medieval period. The European forces, disorganized and overly confident, suffered a devastating defeat. Ottoman discipline, combined with tactical use of terrain and reserve forces, including Serbian cavalry, secured a decisive victory. The aftermath was brutal. Thousands of crusaders were executed. As described by historian Jean W. Sedlar, the Battle of Nicopolis confirmed the Ottoman military machine as the most formidable in Southeast Europe and extinguished crusading fervor in the region for decades. Bayezid's triumph further solidified his dominance, not only militarily but psychologically. European courts now feared the Ottomans as a force that could not easily be undone by traditional feudal armies. Parallel to his military endeavors, Bayezid introduced key internal reforms. He strengthened the timar system, a system in which cavalrymen, or sipahis, were granted land revenues in exchange for military service. This allowed for a dependable and decentralized way of maintaining a large cavalry. Moreover, Bayezid expanded the devshirme system and reinforced the Janissary Corps. These elite infantrymen, recruited from Christian families and converted to Islam, became a central pillar of Ottoman battlefield success. Their loyalty lay with the Sultan alone, and their training and discipline made them one of the most feared units in the medieval world. Colin Imber remarks, Bayezid's centralizing efforts laid the groundwork for Ottoman absolutism. His institutional innovations were not merely military, they were ideological, redefining the very nature of Ottoman sovereignty. By the early 1400s, Bayezid's empire stretched from the Aegean to the Danube and deep into Anatolia, but his assertiveness in the east began to draw the attention of Timur, Tamerlane, the Central Asian warlord who claimed supremacy over the Muslim world. Bayezid's claim to the title of Sultan Arum, his refusal to acknowledge Timur's seniority, and his interference in eastern Anatolian affairs brought both men into confrontation. The looming shadow of Timur's campaign would test the limits of Bayezid's power, but that cataclysm belongs to the next chapter of Ottoman history. Bayezid III's reign was a watershed in Ottoman history. Through swift and aggressive campaigns, he not only expanded Ottoman dominion to unprecedented extents, but also redefined the political and ideological framework of the empire. His rule marked the transition from a frontier principality to a centralized sultanate with global ambitions. As Soraya Faroki concludes, Bayezid's reign epitomized the duality of Ottoman power, rooted in military pragmatism, yet fueled by imperial ideology. Though his downfall would be as dramatic as his rise, Bayezid's legacy endured in the military structures he fortified, in the territories he annexed, and in the sultanic ideology he helped define. In the early 15th century, the Ottoman Empire teetered on the brink of collapse. The aftermath of Sultan Bayezid, the first's defeat at the Battle of Ankara in 1402, left the empire fragmented, with his sons vying for control in a period known as the Interregnum. Amidst this turmoil, Mehmed the first emerged as a unifying figure, restoring the empire's cohesion and setting the stage for its resurgence. The interregnum between 1402 and 1413 was a period of civil war and political fragmentation, following Bayezid II's defeat by Timur. Bayezid's sons, Suleiman, Isa, Musa, and Mehmed, each claimed the throne, leading to a protracted conflict. Mehmed, operating from Amasya, gradually consolidated power in Anatolia, defeating his brothers and restoring central authority. The decisive Battle of Chamurlu on July 5, 1413, marked the end of the interregnum, with Mehmed emerging as the sole ruler. As noted in historical accounts, the interregnum would last a little under 11 years and culminate in the Battle of Chamurlu on 5 July 1413, when Mehmed Çelebi emerged as victor, crowned himself Sultan Mehmed I, and restored the empire. Following his victory, Mehmed I focused on re-establishing the administrative structures of the empire. He reinstated the Taimar system, ensuring the loyalty of the military aristocracy, and worked to restore the empire's financial stability. Mehmed also emphasized the importance of justice and order, reinforcing the role of Islamic law in governance. His leadership was crucial in restoring stability to the Ottoman Empire after the chaotic interregnum. In 1416, Mehmed faced a significant challenge from Şeyh Bedreddin, a former chief judge under Musa Çelebi. Bedreddin led a revolt advocating for a syncretic belief system and communal ownership, attracting a diverse following. The rebellion spread across western Anatolia and the Balkans, posing a serious threat to Mehmed's authority. Mehmed responded decisively, dispatching forces to quell the uprising. Bedreddin was captured and executed, effectively ending the rebellion. As detailed in Zasudikra Researcher records, after Musa's defeat by Ottoman Sultan Mehmed in 1413, Bedreddin was exiled to Iznik. In 1416, he raised the standard of revolt against the Ottoman state. Mehmed adopted a cautious approach to foreign policy, focusing on diplomacy to stabilize the empire's borders. He reasserted Ottoman suzerainty over vassal states like Serbia and Wallachia and engaged in limited military campaigns to suppress dissent. Mehmed also maintained a delicate balance of power with the Byzantine Empire, avoiding overextension. His reign marked the beginning of a significant consolidation of power, which set the stage for future expansion and the establishment of the Ottomans as a dominant force in the region. Historian Maria Todorova critiques the oversimplified portrayal of the Balkans as inherently unstable, a concept she terms Balkanization. She argues that such narratives overlook the region's complexity and resilience. Mehmed's successful restoration of the Ottoman Empire challenges these reductionist views, demonstrating the capacity for unity and effective governance in the Balkans. Todorova's work, Imagining the Balkans, explores the ontology of the Balkans from the 16th century to the present day, uncovering the ways in which an insidious intellectual tradition was constructed and mythologized. Mehmed's reign was pivotal in restoring the Ottoman Empire after a period of fragmentation. Through strategic consolidation, effective governance, and decisive action against internal dissent, he re-established central authority and laid the groundwork for future imperial growth. His efforts ensured the continuity of the Ottoman state, setting the stage for the accomplishments of his successors. In an era where the Balkans were perceived as fragmented and peripheral, one sultan's campaigns would reframe the region as central to the imperial ambitions of the rising Ottoman state. As historian Noel Malcolm starkly puts it, Kosovo should by all rights be a historical and political backwater. Yet under Murad II, it became a crucible of military ambition, European resistance, and Ottoman consolidation. Murad II, who reigned from 1421 to 1444 and again from 1446 to 1451, was a transitional figure in Ottoman history. He inherited an empire fractured by the aftermath of the Ottoman interregnum and internal rebellions. Halil İnalcık describes this period as a turning point. Murad II's reign marked a pivotal phase in Ottoman history, during which he successfully unified the empire and restored its political stability after facing threats of power struggles, civil wars, internal rebellions, and external interventions. From the onset of his reign, Murad sought to restore and centralize Ottoman authority, launching military campaigns against the Anatolian beyliks and European adversaries. His aim was not only the preservation of inherited territories, but the projection of Ottoman power deeper into Europe. The strategic focus of Murad's reign was southeastern Europe, where the fragmented Christian polities and the ambitions of Venice and Hungary intersected with Ottoman expansion. The despotate of Serbia under George Branković fluctuated between alliance and rebellion. Venice, controlling maritime routes, resisted Ottoman advances in Albania and the Aegean. Hungary, under John Hunyadi, emerged as the primary military antagonist. These conflicts were not isolated, but represented a broader resistance to the Ottoman frontier's transformation into a consolidated imperial domain. the Ottoman campaigns in Serbia and Albania aimed to isolate Hungary and secure the Western Balkans, paving the way for further military engagements. The most ambitious European counterattack against the Ottomans during Murad's coup's reign was the Crusade of Varna. Supported by the papacy and led by King Władysław III of Poland and Hungary, along with Hunyadi, the Crusader army sought to push the Ottomans out of Europe entirely. Franz Babinger notes, "The Battle of Varna was the last major effort by the Christian nations to drive the Ottoman Turks from Europe, and their defeat had massive consequences. On November 10, 1444, the two forces clashed near the Black Sea. Despite being pressured to abdicate in favor of his young son Mehmed II, Murad returned to command the Ottoman forces personally. The result was a devastating Christian defeat. King Władysław III was killed and the crusading effort collapsed. John Fine remarks, "The defeat at Varna in 1444 ended any serious hope of a Christian reconquest of the Balkans. The Ottoman grip on southeastern Europe was now secure, and Murad had once again demonstrated the resilience of the empire." The second blow. Only 4 years later, the Second Battle of Kosovo reinforced the permanence of Ottoman dominance in the Balkans. John Hunyadi, undeterred by Varna, led a coalition force of Hungarians and Wallachians into Ottoman territory, hoping to exploit any perceived Ottoman vulnerability. Yet, the battle, fought over 2 days in October 1448, ended in another decisive Ottoman victory. Stephen R. Turnbull details the campaign. Hunyadi led an army of 24,000 men, including 8,000 Wallachians, but suffered another military defeat without even seeing his Albanian allies. The symbolic weight of Kosovo, already steeped in the memory of the 1389 battle, was now reaffirmed under Murad II, becoming a cornerstone of Ottoman martial mythology. Kosovo, a region that, in Malcolm's words, should by all rights be a historical and political backwater, had instead become central to the Ottoman-European conflict, a stage on which the fate of empires was decided. These victories under Murad II did more than defeat European coalitions. They established the framework upon which Mehmed II would build. Murad's preference for practical diplomacy, such as renewing vassal ties and offering lenient terms to defeated foes, allowed the Ottomans to consolidate rather than merely conquer. His military reforms enhanced the Janissary Corps and established firm control over the Balkans, ensuring stability for future expansion. Crucially, Murad II laid the ideological and logistical groundwork for the Ottoman Empire's next phase. By reaffirming control over contested regions and demonstrating Ottoman military supremacy, he turned the Balkans from a volatile frontier into a staging ground for imperial consolidation. Murad II's European campaigns reshaped the balance of power in southeastern Europe. Through decisive victories at Varna and Kosovo, he thwarted Christian attempts to reverse Ottoman gains and secured a legacy of military strength and political acumen. As historians from Halil Inalcik to Franz Babinger and Noel Malcolm attest, his reign was a pivotal chapter in the transformation of the Ottoman state into an enduring empire. The stage was now set for his son, Mehmed II, to take the imperial turn that would forever change the world. O Constantinople, either I shall possess you or you shall possess me. With these words, Sultan Mehmed II, at the age of 21, embarked on a campaign that would not only alter the course of Ottoman history, but also redefine the geopolitical landscape of the medieval world. The conquest of Constantinople in 1453 marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire as a dominant imperial power. The siege of Constantinople was a culmination of meticulous planning and military innovation. Mehmed II assembled an army estimated between 60,000 and 80,000 soldiers, including elite Janissary troops, cavalry, and infantry. A significant advancement was the employment of massive cannons, notably the basilica, designed by Hungarian engineer Orban. This supersized cannon could fire massive stone balls weighing several hundred pounds, capable of destroying portions of the city's ancient fortifications. As Halil Inalcik notes, the use of artillery in the conquest of Constantinople represented a turning point in siege warfare, symbolizing the transition to early modern military strategies. To complement the land assault, Mehmed implemented a naval blockade, effectively isolating Constantinople. In a strategic masterstroke, he ordered the construction of a road of greased logs across Galata on the north side of the Golden Horn, and dragged his ships over the hill directly into the Golden Horn on April 22nd, bypassing the chain barrier. Stephen Runciman described this maneuver as one of the most imaginative feats of military engineering in the Middle Ages. On May 29, 1453, after weeks of relentless bombardment and several failed assaults, Mehmed launched a final massive offensive. The elite Janissary Corps breached the Theodosian walls, leading to the city's fall. Emperor Constantine XI perished in battle, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire. Mehmed's entry into the city was marked by a symbolic act. He proceeded directly to the Hagia Sophia, the grand cathedral of Eastern Christianity, and ordered its conversion into a mosque. This act signified not only the conquest of a city, but also the appropriation of its spiritual and imperial legacy. As historian Caroline Finkel puts it, the transformation of Hagia Sophia was the cornerstone of Mehmed's imperial ideology, linking Ottoman rule with the universalism of the Roman and Byzantine worlds. Following the conquest, Mehmed II initiated a series of reforms to transform the Ottoman state into an empire. He declared Constantinople, renamed Istanbul, the new capital, replacing Edirne. To repopulate the city, he deported Muslim and Christian groups from Anatolia and the Balkans and forced them to settle in Constantinople. In 1459, Mehmed ordered the construction of the Topkapı Palace, which would serve as the administrative and residential center of the empire. The palace complex was strategically located on the tip of the peninsula, offering panoramic views of the Bosphorus, the Golden Horn, and the Sea of Marmara. Its architecture reflected the grandeur of the empire, featuring elaborate courtyards, lush gardens, and majestic buildings. Mehmed also assumed the title Kaiser-i Rum, Caesar of Rome, asserting his claim as the legitimate successor to the Roman emperors. This title was more than symbolic. It represented Mehmed's ambition to position the Ottoman Empire as the continuation of the Roman and Byzantine traditions, thereby legitimizing his rule over the diverse populations of his empire. According to Cemal Kafadar, Mehmed's appropriation of the Roman legacy was not a mere flourish of rhetoric. It formed the ideological core of his statecraft. Mehmed's policies extended beyond administrative reforms. He also focused on cultural and religious integration. He established the Patriarchate of Constantinople, granting the Orthodox Church a degree of autonomy under Ottoman rule. This move aimed to placate the Christian population and integrate them into the imperial system. Moreover, Mehmed encouraged the settlement of various ethnic and religious groups in Istanbul, fostering a cosmopolitan environment. This policy not only revitalized the city's economy, but also reinforced the image of the Ottoman Empire as a multi-ethnic and multi-religious state. Heath Lowry observes, Mehmed's inclusivist policy in repopulating and restructuring Constantinople was a calculated effort to transform the city into a true imperial capital, mirroring the pluralistic nature of his empire. The conquest of Constantinople by Mehmed II marked a pivotal moment in world history. Through military innovation, strategic planning, and symbolic acts, Mehmed transformed the Ottoman principality into a formidable empire. His assumption of the title Kesari Rum and the establishment of Istanbul as the imperial capital signified a deliberate effort to position the Ottoman Empire as the rightful successor to the Roman and Byzantine legacies. As historian Franz Babinger asserts, Mehmed the Conqueror was not merely a warrior, he was a statesman who understood that empires are not built by swords alone, but by visions. This imperial turn not only reshaped the political landscape of the region, but also laid the foundation for the Ottoman Empire's dominance in the centuries to follow. The Ottoman Empire was not born in fire alone. It was shaped through ideas, administration, and myth. Dr. Emine Fetvaçı, Boston University. This insight encapsulates the essence of the Ottoman Empire's evolution following the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. While military prowess secured territorial expansion, it was the empire's sophisticated administrative structures, commitment to religious tolerance, and cultivation of a unifying Islamic identity that sustained its dominion for centuries. The period following the conquest marked the genesis of the Pax Ottomana, a time characterized by relative peace, economic prosperity, and cultural flourishing across a vast and diverse empire. The Ottoman Empire's vast expanse encompassed a mosaic of ethnicities, languages, and religions. To manage this diversity, the Ottomans developed the millet system, a form of decentralized governance that granted religious communities a degree of autonomy. Each millet, be it Muslim, Christian, or Jewish, was allowed to govern its own affairs, including matters of education, justice, and worship, under the leadership of its religious authorities. This system fostered a sense of communal identity, while ensuring loyalty to the Sultan. Historian Bruce Masters notes that the millet system was instrumental in maintaining social harmony. By allowing non-Muslim communities to govern themselves in matters of personal law, the Ottomans effectively managed a multi-ethnic empire without imposing cultural homogeneity. This approach not only minimized resistance, but also integrated diverse populations into the imperial framework, contributing to the empire's longevity. While the millet system allowed for local autonomy, the Ottoman central government pursued a policy of administrative centralization to consolidate power. The Sultanate established a hierarchical bureaucracy staffed by trained officials, many of whom were products of the devshirme system, a practice of recruiting Christian boys, converting them to Islam, and educating them for state service. The central administration was organized around the Divan, the imperial council, which oversaw various aspects of governance, including finance, military affairs, and justice. The codification of laws, known as Kanun, supplemented Islamic Sharia law, providing a legal framework that addressed the complexities of a diverse empire. This dual legal system allowed the Ottomans to administer a vast territory effectively. As historian Halil İnalcık explains, the coexistence of Sharia and Kanun enabled the Ottomans to adapt Islamic principles to the practical needs of governance. The administrative efficiency, legal pluralism, and cultural integration achieved by the Ottomans culminated in a period of relative peace and stability known as the Pax Ottomana. Spanning from the 15th to the 17th centuries, this era was marked by economic prosperity, flourishing trade, and vibrant cultural exchange across the empire's territories. The Pax Ottomana facilitated the movement of goods, people, and ideas, contributing to the empire's wealth and the enrichment of its diverse populations. Cities like Istanbul, Cairo, and Baghdad became centers of commerce and culture, attracting scholars, artists, and merchants from across the world. Historian Suraya Farokhi emphasizes the significance of this period. The Pax Ottomana created conditions under which economic and cultural life could flourish, making the empire a hub of global interaction. The transformation of the Ottoman Empire following the conquest of Constantinople was not solely a product of military conquest, but also the result of deliberate administrative strategies, cultural policies, and legal innovations. By embracing a multi-ethnic administration, reinforcing Islamic identity, and fostering religious tolerance, the Ottomans established a centralized yet flexible governance model that sustained the empire for centuries. The Pax Ottomana stands as a testament to the empire's ability to harmonize diversity and unity, creating a legacy that continues to inform discussions on governance, cultural integration, and religious coexistence in complex societies. As the story of the Ottoman rise draws to a close, remember this is just one chapter in the sweeping saga of medieval empires that shaped the world we live in. If you're interested in how another kingdom emerged from the ruins of Rome, watch our video on the Visigothic kingdom in Spain, where warlords and bishops forged a new order on the Iberian Peninsula. Or explore the Reconquista, the centuries-long struggle to reclaim Spain from Muslim rule, an epic tale of resistance, religion, and revival.